Still running a diagnostic whilst we get going. But my very first one is to answer a question that Rob asked, Rob Murray. And I'm going to chide Rob and he's going to hate me, but that's just the way it's going to be, Rob. And the question he asked me is there going to be any improvement in the clarity in the new standard about getting closer? How much closer will you be able to get under the standard? At the current stage, the maximum you can do at the moment is 100%. Under the new standard, the maximum you can do is 100%. So you can't do any more than 100%. Anything more than 100%, of course, won't work. But knowing what you're asking, they're asking is there any improvement in the clarity about how close we can get to a tree? And the answer is yes. There has been some considerable improvement in the communication, but the current standard says that you can get as close as you can demonstrate and have the tree remain viable. So that means you can have 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% incursion. I mean, in most cases, you're not going to go that high. But if I just look at the basics for a transplant, and transplants are permissible under the standard, most transplants have an incursion of 75% or more. And they're permissible. So if they're permissible, then it stands to reason that you can have a 75% encroachment. And what I don't ever understand is when I see people say, oh, look, there's going to be a 50% encroachment on the tree. Oh, that's too close to that fig tree. You'll have to transplant it. And I scratch my head every time and think, hang on, I can have in case of figs, usually an 80 or 85% encroachment. I can have that, but I can't have a 50% encroachment. That just doesn't make any common sense. So not sure why we have that sort of behavior, but we do. Let me just try something else here. Not getting anywhere, sorry guys, just only getting one screen. And it's saying there's no network and I'm on the same network. Okay, I'll give up on that. So Rob, does that make some form of sense for you?
Yes, but with the current standard, we talk about a 10% encroachment triggering the need for a non-destructive root investigation.
No, it doesn't say that. The real big problem with the standard is, as arborists, we don't like reading and we don't like analysing. At the moment, it says that when you have a major encroachment, you may. Let me just pull up a copy and share it. Best that we have it in front of us and we can get it exactly right. Come on.
Even though it says may, in Melbourne, the city councils will demand it anyway.
Well, yeah, and that's a part of what we've tried to improve in the communication process. Again, some cities see it as an absolute limit. That is, you can only have a minor encroachment. That's it. Anything more is not permissible. But it's not what the standard says. And we've, in the new version of the standard, which will come out in the next few months, there's been a real attempt to try and communicate that more clearly. Because it's not what the standard was ever intended for. The standard is, the intent of the standard is to keep trees, keep them healthy and viable on development sites. And what I've seen it used for is a great way to get rid of trees. And that, in my mind of thinking, seems absurd. I'll keep a tree. In fact, I'll recommend trees that are shown as being removed to be kept. Even if they're in an exempt exclusion zone, you can still keep them and then remove them later on if you want. But trees add value to the development, so it makes sense to try and retain them. Let me get a copy of the standard though for you. In fact, I'll pull up a marked up version. Teaching materials. Trees and development sites. No, I thought I'd find it quickly, but it's been a while since I've taught. Yeah, marked up documents. There we are. Standards. 4970. Okay. And I will share that now. So let me just see how to do that there. Share a particular tab. Window. S4970, share. And this is, what's it not letting me get there? Okay, you should be able to see that now. Do you want me to make that larger? Is that better?
I can't see it. I'm just using my phone because there's a huge Telstra outage at the moment here.
I don't know what's happening this end either.
It's not too bad as it is. A little bit larger would be good.
A little bit larger, yeah. Okay, so the standard at no point talks about tree retention or tree removal being a priority. And in fact, it makes clear the opposite point. Describes the best practice for planting and protecting of trees. It's got an informative index, and the standard provides guidance for arborists. It's never, does it say the standard provides absolute limits or extremes or anything like that. The landscape design bits was one of the issues I had. With trees are what our issue is, not landscape design. So you can see there was a landscape designer on the committee who dominated. Procedures must be in place to protect trees at every stage of the development process. Appropriate species sound structure. Most trees will take many years, possibly decades to establish. I have issues with those sort of comments. And I've been pretty outspoken about those. Protecting trees in accordance with the standard may influence design and construction costs. A typical local government, that's not a may, that is a will. It will affect design, it will affect construction costs, and it's not necessarily wrong that it should. The standard, it does not argue for or against development or for the removal or retention of trees, nor does it consider the monetary value of trees. The standard does not apply to the establishment of new trees. So that makes it pretty clear for us. It should never have been used or misused in that way. It's just, if we're going to retain the trees, how do we do it? And then we go down to 3.2. And there's been some reworking of these areas, but there'll be an improvement of it in another version. So the standard is already scheduled for a second revision. So 2.3.4. Consideration should be given to tree sensitive measures. Purpose of this, determine the impact on trees for trees to be retained. 2.3.5. I've lost it. It's in 3.
There should be a list under.
Yeah. So 3.3.2, minor encroachment. If the proposed encroachment is less than 10% of the area of the TPZ and is outside the structural root zone, detailed root investigation should not be required. The area lost to this encroachment should be compensated for elsewhere and contiguous with the TPZ. Variations must be made by the project arborist considering relevant factors listed in clause 3.3.4. The figures in Appendix D demonstrate some examples of how this can happen, and those figures have been improved remarkably in the next standard or the next version. Really help clean it up. If the proposed encroachment is greater than 10% of the TPZ or is inside the structural root zone, the project arborist must demonstrate that the tree or trees would remain viable. The area lost to this encroachment should be compensated for elsewhere. It doesn't have to be, and contiguous with the TPZ. Again, doesn't necessarily have to be. This may require root investigation by non-destructive methods and consideration of the relevant factors in clause 3.3.4. Now, notice it says relevant factors, not all factors. And yet, I agree, Rob. I've had cities say to me, "Oh, we want you to address each of those factors," and I've had to go through and do that. A is the first one there, and you seem to think that, well, that's the first thing off the list, and therefore it's the most important. And it probably is to some extent important. Jeremy, up your end of the world, how does it work?
Exactly that. 10% is this magical line that council says, no, it's greater than 10%. Tree either needs to come out or you need to redesign it.
Yeah, well,
we do have some success in changing their minds, but it is really hard to argue against.
Yeah, and it's because they've had their minds locked in thinking. So you've tried to communicate with the standard more clearly this time around. What I can tell you, in anticipation of the standard coming out, and of course you've seen the draft go out there, but I can tell you there will be a 10% and a 20% in the new standard, and that it's only beyond 20% encroachment that the standard suggests that in most instances will you be looking at root investigation. Under 20%, the standard suggests that you probably won't. Now, a city, of course, is welcome to do whatever they like, as is an arborist. I mean, I do a root investigation every 12 months, 2 years. I'll almost do anything but do a root investigation. I'll walk from the project rather than do a root investigation for 2 reasons. The first reason is it's horrible work. And if I'm putting down, for example, a basement car park, it means I need to excavate theoretically down to 2.5 meters below ground level. That's a fairly deep excavation to do a root examination on. And then I'm going to produce some data, and I'm going to give that data back. And a classic example, I had a city that were looking at cutting one root to put a slab in. The root was 6.5 centimeters in diameter. The tree was 65 centimeters in diameter. So about 3% of the root biomass was going to be cut. It's a jacaranda. I've cut up to 75% of a jacaranda's root system off when I've transplanted them, and they transplant fairly well. So I'm fairly comfortable that taking out 3% is nothing. And yet the city turned around and said, no, you cannot do that. If you cut a 6.5 centimeter root on a tree this size, you could cause the tree to become structurally unstable.
Oh, God.
Now, that's fine. That's their belief. It doesn't tally up with any data anywhere. It's just a belief. And I watched a wonderful documentary on one of the streaming channels just the other night of a guy who wanted to get get a spaceship and go up into space. He's planning to get up to 55,000 feet, I believe it is, because he believes that the Earth is flat. Now, the Earth is flat and the Moon is flat. They're flat discs. And he's entitled to believe that. He doesn't think the Earth is curved. Of course, you only have to go up in a commercial aircraft and look out the side window on early in the morning or late in the evening or late in the afternoon, and you can see the curvature. So you can see that it's a spherical object. So it fascinates me that people don't think things through. And arborists are just like everyone else. The other thing you've got to keep in mind, Rob, is there are several sorts of arborists out there. There are arborists out there that really aren't comfortable with their knowledge. They feel like, I've got a lot more to learn, and I fit into that category. We're just starting to get going on trees. Then there's arborists out there that got their diploma in 5 days or 10 days and paid a reasonable amount of money for that. And that's fine too. They went through all the RPL process. Some of those RTOs may not have been the best. Some of the RTOs that delivered might not be the best. But they believe they did so well that they can walk on water. They are God's answer to arboriculture. And they sincerely believe with every inch of their body that they're right. And there's something absolutely contagious about sincerity. And it's a difficult one to deal with. So you have a hard job in communicating to somebody who believes that beyond 10% you need to do a root investigation. It's interesting. Hamilton suggests that work other than a major encroachment onto the roots and major encroachment or major impact on the roots, he says is 50%. And if under 50%, he says the tree will generally recover and continue to grow satisfactory. Now, I'm assuming, and the paper doesn't say it, but I'm assuming that means with some modicum of input arboriculturally. So there may be some irrigation, some mulching, something like that. So where do we get these things from? That's one part. The other part is even the best developers are pretty slack when it comes to following arborist recommendations for two reasons. One is they spend enough time not doing what the arborist has asked that they know that the arborist is full of crap, me included. Okay, so I say, hey, you really need to be at least 6 meters away from that 1 meter diamond tree on this side, and I don't want you coming any closer. And they think, well, hang on a second. I remember a tree that we went 3 times away 20 years ago, and I went past that tree the other day, and it's still looking good. So they get this positive reinforcement about arborists not knowing a lot. And so it's difficult for us to deal with that situation. But the scariest arborists on the face of the earth are those that believe that their 300 hours, 200 hours, or their life experiences make them unequivocal, undeniable, irrefutable experts. Because I've been wrong so many times that it's horrendous. Just upsetting. Yes, Jeremy.
One way I've found with getting around that magical 10% encroachment was to use visual representation of your transplants and say, okay, well, like you say, we got a 50% encroachment on this fig, but we're leaving it in situ. Well, here's the visual representation of what the transplant looks like, and you're willing to accept that. And I've had a few successes with that. When you can put it into a picture, people will buy into it.
Yes, look, I agree with that, but I still get problems. And one of the things that I'll often hear is, yes, but we're not transplanting it. And I sometimes wonder, you're laughing because you've had the same.
Yeah.
And I wonder where the thinking goes that, oh, I can cut off a portion of the root plate and And that's going to be somehow rather worse than cutting all the way around and then cutting underneath and moving the trees that way. So, yeah, it's a difficult process. And a lot of it is, that's what I was taught. And I was taught all sorts of things. I was taught you can't move eucalypts, you can't move acacias. The Australian natives are poor for moving. Until you get to California or Hawaii, and in California, 50% of what's moved is Australian native. It's just the myth that we develop. And
I think on the DA side too, there's also other forces that are pushing behind those people that are coming back at you and saying, no, you can't encroach more than 10%. This is just another thing for DA assessment to chuck in the bucket to go, no, we want less development. So there are many other forces out there other than just the tree that you're trying to fight the tree's corner.
Yeah, and I think Jeremy's right. There's certainly often trees are, if I can use the phrase, often trees are weaponized. That is, you find that whilst the tree wouldn't, or the issue might not have been an issue otherwise, it becomes a part of the issue. And I just finished off with a matter before the LEC, where that's exactly what happened, and it's so obvious, because in the end, what was originally suggested and refused by the council is essentially what got approved at mediation. What they wanted to do is they wanted to have the developer come to the mediation table and make changes and make alterations, and the trees were just a weapon to do that with. And it's a shame that happens, but it does happen. One of the things that I will point out, Rob, is if you start to believe you can come close to the trees and you try it and it works, you've got to remember that you've got to be consistent with that. And it's the same as risk. I don't look at most dead trees. If I can't push the dead tree over, it's, a 30-centimetre dead tree. If I can't push it over, I can't say that I think it's going to fail in the next 12 months, because in most cases that's fanciful. So then there's no point in me saying, oh, that's a high risk, because it would be convenient to get rid of that tree at this moment in time. No, that's just a maintenance issue that can get dealt with at some stage. And so I've got to be consistent across not just that site, but everywhere I apply my thinking. Your thinking is not something that you can flip and change, and if you do, you'll have problems. Now, it doesn't mean you can't flip once or can't flip twice in your career or 3 times. I confess to having brush boxes because they had co-dominant stems. I just shudder that I did that. It's just partly unnecessary, but that was the prevailing thought in the 1990s. And it didn't take long before I started to question that and saying, hang on a second, why aren't they failing? They're meant to be this dangerous. Why aren't they failing? And same with dead branches. If dead branches are a probable likelihood of failure, as is suggested by some in the ISR track department, it means that dead branches would only be in trees for 2 years. That's laughable. Today I went and looked at a camphor laurel that the arborist said the work needed to be done in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from the report. I looked at the dead branch. It had been cut off. It was probably 5 centimeters in diameter where it was cut off. And I thought, I've got to do it. It was low enough to the ground. I reached up. I lifted my weight plus my consulting harness, which weighs about another 10, 15 kilos, off the ground. And if it didn't break with that, how was gravity or the wind going to make it break? And so what you see there is a similar thing. It's called risk transference. It says that I, the assessor, don't want to take any of the risk about the risk assessment. I'll transfer that to the property owner, and I'll make them do everything and anything that I see that could possibly go wrong that I might get sued for, because I'm really not comfortable with what I'm doing. And that is a lot of what you see with when it comes to trees and development sites. If you want to know what trees do, I'll tell you, everywhere you go, when you see a tree that's been dug past, You see an excavation for a basement. Grab photographs and go back and look at them. My best ones are from 1989. And there's some Norfolk Island pines down at Manly where they drove sheep piling in probably 2 times trunk diameter, half the way around the tree. And the consultant that I was with said, that's just a horrible thing to do to the tree. It's, going to ruin them. They're going to die. And I'm absolutely sure he's right. That one day they will die. But as of 2025, they're still doing fine. Now, I'm not suggesting you go do that to every tree, but, the fact that people have done that to trees and they've survived raises this big question. How do we get 12 times? And 12 times is simply an arbitrary trigger point. That's all that it is. And I think the standard uses a little bit more of that sort of language, Robin, in the way it communicates the revised standard. Talks about it being the point at which triggers the response of an arborist.
So with the revised standard, what's the difference between the 10% and the 20% encroachments?
Yeah, look, I really have to let you wait until the standard comes out. A minor encroachment and a moderate encroachment and then a major encroachment. I can give you that. And it actually talks about how to address them. So again, a minor encroachment usually only needs a desktop assessment. And I'll give you the reason why. At one stage, the British standard had an encroachment. The trigger point was 10 times trunk diameter. So 10 times 10 is the area times pi. So pi is always going to be in the area. So 10 times 10 is 100. The Americans came along and they said, well, that's good. And they used the British standard, Matheny and Clark, and they said, let's make it easier for American arborists because 10 inches is 100 inches is, let's just make it 10 inches, 10 foot, 12 times. Now, if you do the 12 times equation, 12 times 12 is 144. There's 44% extra area added because Americans are largely innumerate. No offense to the Americans, because the Australians are pretty close behind. It's just we had decimal points and that made it a little easier. We can count to 10 where, we use toes and fingers, whereas Americans don't have 12 and 12. That's just other parts of Australia that's got that. Realistically, there should never have been an issue with 10%. There shouldn't really be an issue with 20% encroachment. Can I just take this, guys? Won't be long. Oh. Good. Yeah, I'll have to put it back in the middle of the meeting. Okay. I'm in the middle of the meeting. I'll put it back. Sorry. So yes, I think the bottom line of it, Rob, is sincerity. It's a great part of looking at what goes on. Can we look at Nissa's report is the question that's just come up. Yes, we can, but I haven't done much work on it, I've got to tell you. So
did you see the other report Nils sent through, Mark?
When did they come through, Peter? Today?
Yeah, I've sent quite several queries through today.
Okay, I'll pull through. I just hadn't been in the office until I just got back in. So I'll stop sharing that one. And I'll open up the emails and go through those ones as well. So hopefully that answers your question, Rob, pending the standard coming out. When the standard comes out, have a good read through it. My recommendation on any standard is read through it with a pen and a pencil, make lots of notes, try and work it through. They're not written by the most eloquent writers. They're written by a committee, so sometimes you get the duckbill platypus result. That is, you get things that just aren't always as clear or as precise as we'd want.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Just opening up emails. That takes a little bit of time in this end of the world.
The new report I sent through, Mark's probably a bit better to go through than the other ones.
Okay, thank you. Just closing down some pages to make it a little less. I mean, I've got a high-speed internet here and it's struggling today. So I do have several that Peter sent through fairly recently. First one was grafted trees, and it was from Graham Pritchard. And the question is asked, how good are these grafts? What are they like? You know, do they create problems? And by the looks of it, he's sent me some pictures of some Phycifolias, and I can share the picture, I guess. How do I go about that? Window, share. So these are some Phycifolias that he's talking about, and I'll zoom it up. No, it won't allow me to go much bigger than that. So he's having some troubles with some graft unions. Phycifolia corymbias are an interesting plant. Come along and play anatomy with me. In the corymbias, you have kino produced both in the wood and in the bark, and they like to reject the unions. It's really hard to get the unions well. So you get lots of pockets in those unions where it's rejected. And I've got a really lovely specimen of a failed union from a grafted Corymbia variegata, a variegated form, Jessica's jewel, onto a maculata base, and probably 80% of the union had rejected, just constantly rejection after rejection after rejection. So they can be problematic. The other issue that comes with grafted material is the same things that comes from cuttings, and that's often clonal. So the above ground material is all susceptible to the same problem. So not saying I wouldn't like it. The problem with something like Phycifolia is the rootstock does not tolerate the coastal moisture that we get here in New South Wales, or Jeremy gets in Brisbane. Peter gets even worse in the northern rivers. So the root system has real problems with it getting wet, and you just don't get them surviving. So if you graft onto something that will tolerate it, then that water tolerance is inherent from the root system. So you end up with a plant that has some advantages. So good and bad to both sides. I mean, I think, you know, being able to have Phycifolias in the East Coast is a wonderful thing. And that means that they're usually going to be grafted. So hopefully that answers that question. And get to the next one. I know why I don't like opening my emails, Peter. So I've got a question here from Graham again. No supporting images, but a question about pruning. Isn't it uncommon to see trees sprouting from below or above pruning cuts. Can the reason for these it isn't uncommon, sorry. Can the reason for these sprouts be discussed? Yeah, that's really easy, Graham. Eucalypts produce a subcutaneous bud, a bud below the bark, at every union of a leaf and the stem, okay, called an axil. The axil's the angle subtended by the petiole and the branchlet that's on. That bud is there, often two buds there in eucalypts. And when we cut, if we cut too much foliage out, cut too long, too short, then it'll want to take advantage of those buds. So, or meristematic traces. They're actually not buds because there's no leaf primordia at this stage, so nothing ready to print the leaf, but it's a highly meristematic tissue, a meristematic trace, and it wants to form a bud very quickly. And so give it the right conditions, lots of water coming up, lots of hormones to stimulate growth, lots of sunlight, and all of a sudden it says, you know, I really should grow up and start becoming a bud, and the bud grows off and you end up with suckers. So eucalypts are great suckers, but not all of them. Some species of eucalypts are not so great, and they're also often the species of eucalypts that don't do well after fire. So if it's something that does well after fire, it's probably got a crap load, that's a scientific term, a crap load of meristematic traces. If it doesn't produce that, then it won't. And the same thing goes with the lignotuber. The lignotuber is highly specialized, great fire adaptation, and you'll get some populations, for example, of Fosterman convertus, that'll have massive balls at the base, these lignotubers waiting to get going in case there's a fire, and you'll get others that just simply won't produce them. And I suspect that's just simply genetic selection from different areas that are more prone to burning are more likely to have a mechanism for survival. So I hope that answers that question. Yes, Colin.
Hey, have you got me? Yep. Yeah, my question is in regards to the question that you're answering there about pruning causing growth shoots. Isn't there a role of a growth inhibiting hormone coming from the meristematic tissue that's now being cut off, allowing those growths to occur? Is that part of the?
It's that you've got everything there for growth, and you're being stimulated now. So you've got a pipe work, you've got chemicals coming up, you've got sugar, not sugars coming up, you've got water coming up, you've got solutes coming up. Everything's there, and you've got enough sunlight, and the hormones that are coming up from the roots that say grow new leaves, all of a sudden are getting met with a void spot that says, well, damn it, I could start producing, foliage here. I could produce new shoots. So the critical bit is the cut. If you cut at the collar, and look, I got this stuff fairly early in my career, and I reckon if I could get a good collar cut 1% of the time, I've done well. Most cuts are, so you hope to get it close, and you can go back and check that. A good cut will give you a perfect round donut shape occlusion of the pruning wound, or an even, if it's an uneven shaped branch, even occlusion from the edges. And I probably got that, as I said, maybe 1 in 100 times. The rest of the time I was either too close or too far out.
I think I was referring to gibberellins.
Sorry?
I think I was referring to gibberellin hormones in the trees. Is that not a growth inhibiting hormone that's produced in the meristematic tissue?
I don't think you're getting.
I'm getting a couple of things mixed up here, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting suppression. I think you're getting the opposite. I think you're getting stimulation. So when roots start to grow, they're growing because they've got sufficient carbohydrates, soil temperature suitable, soil moisture levels fine. They grow, and they drive the growing process. So growth starts with the roots, which going back to Rob and the transplanting, the big deal with transplanting is when you see that tree flush after it's been moved, you sit there and think, oh, okay, as long as I don't screw up from here on in, we're home and hose, because the tree is telling me that it's got enough water coming up to stimulate new growth. That water comes up with hormones that do that. Okay. And this live crown ratio thing that you might have heard talked about. You take a piece of basil, basilica, whatever you want to call it, cut it, you put it into a glass jar on the windowsill with water in it, and it'll sit. You'll see the roots start to grow, more roots growing, and then all of a sudden the top will start to flush. And that flushing is when we're getting that hormonal response that says there are enough roots, flush. So you cannot get a flush before then. So on a development site, Rob, if you've cut roots and the tree is flushing, there's a reasonable chance you're going to get away with it unless they do something stupid. And if we prune well, I think we take out too much when we prune to start off with. But there are times when we need to remove something. Once we've removed, then we've changed that whole system. If the tree's setting up stimulation for a full canopy, and all of a sudden there's only 80% of the canopy there, that stimulation is then going to be stimulating more than just the apical buds. It's going to be stimulating some of these meristematic traces to become essentially what McCormick shoots along the way. When's the next plant anatomy workshop? Christchurch, New Zealand, I think is our next one. Christchurch, New Zealand, then 2 in San Antonio, Texas, and then I think there's one planned for Melbourne next year. That's to the best of my Hobart. Probably not, Colin.
Next conference in April.
Conferences in
Down here?
Hobart, I don't think they're going to do it. It's just the cost of getting gear across and getting things set up. And we're used to the quarantine issues now. We can deal with them fairly well. But it's getting microscopes set up, getting gear down there. Our basic thing is 2 pallets and then an extra carry-on case for a checking case for each of the 3 of us. Essentially it's 2.5, almost 3 pallets worth of gear to send around. And we've been trying to deal with that by trying to source stuff locally. So talk to Alex at Arbos and see what she says or what she does. But that's where that's at. Okay, so next one from the list of Peter Gray. Can we discuss cabling and bracing? David, not tonight. That's just far too big a topic for tonight, given the other stuff we've got to get through.
No problem. Thank you.
I'll put it on the list for things to be done.
We have discussed cabling and bracing a couple of times recently.
Yeah, look, it's worthwhile looking at things in some more detail. So Andy Erskine sent in a good question. Imidacloprid is a major active ingredient in Confidor. That is the active ingredient. A systemic insecticide that can be administered by spray, tree injection, soil injection, or pills containing a mixture of imidacloprid and slow relief fertilizer. It is categorized by the AVPMA as a low toxicity to humans, which has led to its high popularity with commercial growers and home gardeners. I've used pills successfully to treat early stage of pandanus leaf, and in high profile pandanus, and to prevent blue moth skeletonizing on cycads. I wonder about the dose rate on that, Andy, just because it's not ideal. As I've become aware of the negative effects of imidacloprid, I avoid using the pills when the subject plants are flowering. Yep, that's a smart move. When bees are present, or when there is a risk of contacting aquatic invertebrates, you better be careful on that one. The native parasitizing wasps is known to biological control for Gemella, but is slow in establishing in the northern New South Wales. My question is, can imidacloprid in its pills forms be used in a manner that is low risk to bees, or are there other systemic insecticides that could offer a safer alternative? Andy, there are some new insecticides on the market. I'm not going to say any because we're in a multi-state situation, multi-jurisdiction. In Queensland, you can go and do what you like as long as you can prove efficacy. You've got insurance, same in Victoria. I don't know what it is for, I do know what it is for Tasmania because I dealt with the forestry service down there once. So you are like us, Colin. You need an off-label permit to do anything that's not in the label. And that is a difficult process. People do work around these things. Imidacloprid can be used to treat fence posts, for example. And when you treat fence posts for termites, it also happens that the adjacent lily-pilly hedge has its lily-pilly leaf beetle is affected. That's just the nature of cross-contamination. So
we're using it to control a cypress bark beetle or bark weevil in some cypress hedges.
Cypress bark beetle is probably, again, ideally controlled as an adult. If you're talking about the native cypress beetle.
I don't have a definite ID on it. It's just a weevil.
Yeah, we have a native weevil that causes problems with conifers in general. So it was a problem for example, Pinus halepensis in Sydney in the, I think about 1940s or 1950s, did a lot of damage to them.
With larvae burrowing through the bark, or is that?
Yeah, burrow into the bark, make a round hole, typical of Percleonidae, line it with a typical shard nest like many of these beetles do. And the time to treat them is the adults. The adults chew on the bark around the tips. So if you can kill them as adults, then they're less problematic as a borer. But there's really good work that shows that both soil moisture levels being increased, so you've got a healthy plant, and trace element fertilization, so that they're in place. It does help reduce it. Andy?
Yeah, thanks. So just like I've had a long period, like over 40 years of trying to control tree insect pests through systemic injection or systemic insecticide injections, including rogue or dimethiate, metasistox, horrible chemicals that were just deadly poisonous. And when Confidor came on the market, it sounded so good that it wasn't going to be transferred through any creatures beyond those that were immediately eating the tree. But and it's been enormously useful to me in like the control of Gemella in Pandanus. But the alternatives don't seem great. I would definitely prefer to use biological controls, which we do on our, in our turf situations and a lot of other situations in Byron Shire. But when I look at what's available as an alternative, it's celtiminoprid, which is a much more toxic insecticide, which is also still being marketed. Fipronil, highly toxic to bees. So none of these are ideal, obviously. Confidor seemed good. And in its pill form, mixed with fertilizer, slow release, it seemed to me as though it was a reasonable method of administering the chemical rather than, physically drilling and injecting into the trees or drenching the soil in insecticides as some of them require. So, it may not be ideal, but I'm just putting it out there as that's where I'm at as far as controlling.
Now, look, I think it's a great chemical. I think Confidor or imidacloprid based insecticides cop a bad rap over the bee issue, and they cop a bad rap over the bee issue because they were, for example, France banned the use of imidacloprids about almost 20 years ago because it was causing colony collapse decline. Now they're not using it, and their bees are still dying. And we're using it in Australia as a high user, and we don't have CCD, at least in anywhere near the proportions that has. Of course, we don't have the virus with the varroa mite either. And what we do know now is that colony collapse decline is a result of early maturation of workers. The repeated early maturation of worker bees causes the colony collapse. Australian research that broke through with that. So trying to minimize your stress. Having said that, I think the amount of imidacloprid that you'd be using, Andy, or the whole arboriculture industry would use, if you include elm leaf beetle and everything else, would be nothing compared with what the cotton industry uses in a week. So whilst we would have some impact, it's only going to be a small proportionate impact. We're not going out there crazy broad acre application of these chemicals. They're often very localized and quite specific. But I do believe that we need to be sensible. So trying to avoid using, for example, a Confidor spray when when the flowers are blooming, it makes great sense. It's just one thing that you can avoid.
Yeah, thank you. When we're faced with iconic bandanas in the main parklands of Byron Bay that people flock to and then go under, it's very hard to watch them go into decline and think, well, I can't spray those because of the high visitation. The pills are a very neat solution. We only use them once a year, and they appear to work.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's that one done. And yes, there are some new derivatives of the neonicotinoids. That's where imidacloprid sits. It's a neonicotinoid, so it's a nicotine type derivative that are showing real promise for being more selective even still, and have sort of pushed past some of the problems. The other group that are showing some good signs are the spinicides. But again, each of them have their limits, so just be aware of that. And of course, always make sure you're following your local legislative rules. So I've dealt with that one. Okay, so here we are with a tree risk assessment that we're going to look at. It has been fully redacted. Well, not fully redacted. We know
enough that I was happy with it.
That Neil's printed it. That it's his one, and he's been prepared to share it. I think that's great. A great way to do things. So
we covered up the client.
Yeah. And
that's the same thing again. That's a post-fire assessment.
Yeah, and look, these fire ones are really unusual. I mentioned previously, and I don't know how good you guys are with your maths, but you add indices or indexes. So 1,000 is 10 to the power of 3, and I went to a school where there were 4 moderate risk trees, and moderate risk trees you get a little bit more often than you would with QTRA tolerable, but I'm going to assume there's somewhere in that same group. And so four trees like that in a school starts to become somewhere around the same odds as winning Oz Lotto. So could you have it? What you've got is a common event that's affected all the trees. So you're going to come across a lot more trees. Table of contents is excellent. It's produced by the software, and that's what we want to see. Lots of stuff in the back. I don't even need to worry now and know that stuff there. An executive summary just gives a quick breakdown to what's been happening. Assess the related risk of harm. Yeah, it's estimated around 200 trees were inspected in total. However, only 46 had features that triggered a risk assessment or general management.
Typo there.
That's an awkward sentence.
Yes, I just realised that.
So
Had should be in front of general management.
generally, no.
It's supposed to be had features that triggered a risk assessment or had general management
needs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll recommend again a couple of different sorts of software, but AI is now getting so smart that if you were to put that into ChatGPT and say, could you check this for grammatical errors? You're a professor of English. Could you point out the errors to me and give me some alternative suggestions of expressing it more accurately? It'll do that for you. Grammarly does it.
That's with Grammarly, actually, but
It's with
maybe
Grammarly, yeah, okay. It's missed that one sentence for you. There is a large number of dead branches throughout the site and multiple hanging branches. Some dead trunks and trees were also observed. 28 out of the 46 trees had features that triggered a risk of harm calculation, but only 10 trees require risk mitigation. So we've got some fairly good breakdowns. 200 trees, we're down at 10 requiring some form of risk. The time frame is a difficult one, because you're saying essentially if it goes to 4 months, there's a problem. And I'm not sure how we deal with that. I'm still at a loss as a assessor. You've got the money, you figure out when you're going to do it, but these are priorities that I would do. And so I would do tree 28 before I did any other tree. I do trees 12, 20, 32, and 40 before I did the remaining trees. So that would be the sequence. If one tree stands out above the rest is needing work, then the next group, and then the third group. Yes, Jeremy's got some ideas on it.
Yeah, so the way I handle that is anything that triggers a risk mitigation work is to be done ASAP. And after that, it's done as budgets allow. However, there is a priority 1 and a priority 2. I just don't put a time frame on it. So I still prioritize of saying, I want you to do this one first, but when you do it when you've got budget.
that's kind of what the idea is, I suppose, with the priority. But yeah, it don't need to have the months there, I suppose.
Yeah. So just what you're saying is essentially mathematically, and this is where the nerd comes out of me. You're saying these are 1/4 of the risk. These are 1/4 of the risk of these, and these are 1/12 of the risk of that. And that's what it infers. It's not that you're saying that, and again, not knowing where those risks are, and we'll see that in a few more seconds. That's going to determine what we've got to do. And so some good information here. Consider printing Appendix 1 and 3 to aid the contracted arborist to undertake the works. I think, again, if you ask ChatGPT to express that in 4 different ways, you'd find one way that would be easier to read, because that's an awkward sentence.
It's supposed to be undertaking.
Consider
typos on this.
The arborist undertaking the works.
So aid the contracted arborist undertaking. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
That's a bit silly.
Words, clearer reading. And I struggle with this constantly in my writing. I write complex sentences, and I've got to constantly say, where can I put a full stop? How can I break it down? How can I get it into fewer words? Brief. Yep, that's fine, good, nice and clear. Estimate. Reporting frequency of the site is estimated to be every 3 to 4 years, and is dependent on funding, obviously. Now, Yep. All your margins are left. Yep. So left justified, right not justified, perfectly fine. And it looks like you've used Arial. Have you as your text? So it's a sans serif text, which is great for
I'm pretty sure it's Arial. Yeah,
yeah.
I can't remember now.
Visit the site. So this, I like this process because you're breaking down your tasks. And ideally, when you write your report, you would deal with these things as you go in little clusters. So that it almost gives you an outline of some of the things you should be talking about. Yep, I agree with you. It's not to eliminate risk. Obviously, we've had some time discussing these things. The risk assessment needs to communicate that information to manager that the risk manager and other stakeholders can use. I think I've read something like that before.
I think so too.
Yeah. Always pose some level of risk by virtue of their size. That's totally from Mr. Red's fun in eliminating or reducing risk already within a broadly acceptable range. I am sure that it's getting too close to my liking, Niels.
I can do something.
So just make sure it's not a direct copy. That's all.
Yeah.
How you went about doing the data. To use the minimum industry standard. Trees were inspected from the ground, focusing on external features only. A visual tree assessment was performed, and you cited your source for that. Data was collected using the following tools. My view is you probably don't need necessarily all the brand stuff, just a diameter tape, a GIS unit, a digital camera, binoculars, and a sounding hammer. Not that it's bad having it in there. I just think that's unnecessary. Jeremy, what's your view on that? You tend to include all that detail in, don't you?
We just do, we make sure we specify what was measured and what was estimated. I very rarely measure height on anything because it's not relevant to a lot of the things we do. And one thing I do put in that's not in there is the accuracy of the GPS. So what sort of accuracy you're running your GPS at. Because that becomes important when you're starting to try and find things, particularly in bush areas.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Now, it needs in my mind, data was recorded on, the QTRA, risk assessment spreadsheet, where the risk of harm is automatically calculated depending on users' input. Calculators been used to check. You've got some assumptions, which is great. So you can tell us roughly how much usage we've got just on some basic figures. Limits, your paragraphs need to spread out. So here you've got limits. You may want to even run on a new page. But where you've got a paragraph, the line space really informs us that it's a paragraph, not so much the indentation at the end, particularly when you're not fully justifying your text. Some information about QTRA that's basic.
I'm pretty sure that from the practice note, that stuff.
Yeah, look, again,
which I don't know if I need to have in there or not.
I tend to appendix that stuff nowadays. You're down at now page 6 less 2 is 4 pages, and I still haven't got to the information. And so people tend not to, more and more not to read. If I send out a 3-paragraph email, I can almost be certain that the first paragraph probably will be read, and then the rest will be ignored. And I don't know whether anyone else has found that. Peter, do you find that in your practice?
I don't actually do surveys of how well people read my emails, but I tend to write as short and simply as I can anyway to try and avoid that very problem. So
yeah. So, you know, there are times when you really do need to have a long technical report, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware that trying to get people to read through. Now,
you have to have a good think about who's meant to be reading it. So if you've got an audience or a stakeholder that's capable of reading a detailed technical report, then fine. But if you've got somebody who just wants to go to the relevant page and find out what to do, different story.
And
yeah.
you can put that, a lot of that stuff in the appendices. So whoever wants to look it up will look it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my view.
Agreed.
Management has a full stop after it. Then the space. It is a method. It is not a methodology. A methodology compares methods. I'll go on it and harp on it till the day I die. So methods.
I think you're in a losing battle, Mark. I mean, widely adopted.
Giving thumbs up there as well. I know it's a losing battle, but you know, arborists like using big words because it makes us sound very photosynthesis. And you know, it's that like contiguous piling and things like that. You just see it, and I'm as guilty as anyone else. I'm not, you know, but that's not what we're trying to do. And what have I done wrong, Colin? You. So
I think that
the
text you're reading there is actually a statement from QTRA saying this is our system, sort of thing, in a short.
Yes, but
version.
you've looked at a full stop,
Yeah.
lost a
Yeah.
space.
But I didn't change
something
it
like that. And
Yeah.
you'll find that over time, if you set your Grammarly up correctly, it should be picking these things up for you.
Yeah.
It should always pick up a full stop. It won't pick up a paragraph spacing. So we've got human occupation, pedestrian. So tag count, constant 2.5. But oh, you've just given the ratings.
Yeah, so all that, the actual risk assessments down in the data table. That's just explaining how I got the numbers.
The first question is why target rating 3 under 2 and target rating 2 under 3?
Oh, it just doesn't.
And nothing wrong with that. But what I'm suggesting again is this process of, it's really hard to edit your own stuff. Incredibly difficult. But I'm assuming that those two are transposed the wrong way around, just from my understanding of QTRA.
That's just target 1 is the human occupation at the campsites. Target 2 is the pedestrians at the site, and target 3 is
yep. Okay.
Congregation areas. Yeah.
Now, the other thing I've stopped using is target rating when it comes to QTRA, and those of you who use it, I like range. So it's QTRA occupation range. It's target range. It's QTRA likelihood of failure range, because it is a range. It's actually a range that's one order of magnitude except size part. The size part's all over this.
That makes sense.
The inner and outer wheel, if you're using a QTRA calculator, are all in log 10 ranges. And that is useful to help people understand. You've not picked a specific number, but it's within that range. So if you've got range, I think you'll find that will help what you write there.
It's kind of obvious when you say it now. When I hear you say the things, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and the only reason I say it is because it's stuff that I've been going through, and as I've been doing them, thinking, what am I communicating to somebody like a judge? Am I saying that this is QTO rating 4? No, I'm saying it's in the range 4. And so I've already taken away this bit about, how can you be that precise? So how can I be that imprecise? There's lots of imprecision in the process, and that's desirable. So more stuff there about your trees. And so,
Mark, can I just go back and get you to clarify something about those 3 different scenarios that Nils had? So I had it in my mind that the method was to choose the highest. So that, you know, if you're talking about targets, well, what's the greatest target and assess on that. And so therefore, logically, the lesser target ranges.
Yeah, I'm losing every second sentence because the lag that's occurring.
So we've got 3 different scenarios.
Well, he's got 3. He's got different results. So he's assessed trees, and tree 28 is an unacceptable risk. And so I would agree with that. That must be done as a matter of priority, as is 1 in 10. They've agreed to 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 1,000 as being a tolerable risk. Is no. So this
I'm
is
just
all
saying that there are 3 trees within that range.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's awkwardly expressed. I don't understand where it comes from within the QTR thing. So all of these are unacceptable in my mind.
Yeah, because they're imposed on others too.
With the highest priority being that.
Yep.
And if you've done a QTRA on them, and we'll get down to there, one of the nice things about it is the QTRA will tell you where each of those assess. And so the answer is, rather than being overly prescriptive, I think, is to say those ones there need to be prioritized. Stuff that's in the tolerable range should be prioritized based, and all of them, in fact, prioritized based on their assessment.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Does that make sense? Did you say? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm just kind of revisiting my report again, and I kind of realized that it's all a bit spread out. All the information's not in the one spot.
That's the beauty of having somebody else look through a report, is that you suddenly can see all those things that you've looked at and noticed before.
Because it obviously makes sense to me, but it's gonna make sense.
Bring them into my office, Niels.
And I kept trying to get my clients to give me feedback, but everyone's like, "Oh, that'd be right. Just go and do the work."
Well, it takes time and effort, and I got to be honest. Do you know why teachers mark assignments?
No.
They get paid for it. That's the only reason they'd read the crap we write. I mean, I say that with all sincerity. You know, the number of assignments that I've handed in the years that I think, I understand why they struggle and strain over it. It's hard work reading. There's a guy called Jordan Peterson. He's a radical right-wing male speaker, but he was a brilliant teacher, and he has developed a program for how to write better. And one of the things he says is, you write the assignment, then you start all over again, and you rebuild every sentence, every paragraph. He said he knows when he's got an A-level student that's going to get really great marks, because he wants to read the assignment. Most of the reports that he gets, or the assignments he gets, he doesn't want to read. And reports fit in the same way. A really good report is one that somebody picks up and says, "Oh, yeah, okay." And they start to read at the beginning, and all of a sudden they've got to the end of the main body of the report and haven't had any struggle in doing. Now, there are very few writers in arboriculture that are like that, but there are some. I'm not one of them. Andy again gives us a clap on that because he agrees. You know, I struggle. I write a lot like I speak. It drives people crazy. I use complex words, complex sentences, and I'm doing my damnedest to try and dumb it down and make it, and not dumb down in the sense of, but make it more user readable. And that is really what our obligation is.
I think there's a real skill in taking a complex idea or a complex argument and expressing it simply. I don't think it's got to do with dumbing it. I think it's different to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think of several things that are like that. You know, Klaus Matic won an award for Stupsy because he was able to communicate extremely well with it. He often talks about a book structures and why they don't fail or why they fail. Gordon was the author. It was a Penguin paperback, a mechanical engineering textbook written in language that lay people could understand, that became a Penguin bestseller. That's real skill in writing. You know, I've read enough textbooks in my life to think, you know, it's rare that you pick one up and you think, oh, wow. And, you know, six chapters later, you're saying, oh, I don't want to put it down. Trees by Colin Tudge was one of those books. Wonderful book. You know, you start, and there's a few chapters that are hard going, but most of them, you know, you just want to get to read the next chapter. You know, how do I read faster? And that's what we're really trying to write with our reports. So recommendations, so some good, no removals, some pruning. I think having the no removals there does communicate well. 26 trees. Why are these minor risk mitigation? Is that?
Just stuff that's not essential, I suppose.
Yeah, okay.
Things, trees that that might have had tolerable risks and things like that.
Yep, fine.
Or things that are not. It's not a hanging branch. Like if it's a hanger,
Yeah,
I'd probably recommend removing it, even if the risk is pretty low, because it's obviously not going to get any better. It's not going to attach itself again.
You may do well just to put a little quick footnote for each of these. Essential risk mitigation is work that must be done to be compliant with the probability of risk framework and therefore the work health and safety legislation. And maybe think about this as being something to low priority risk mitigation and as stuff that should be done where the resources are available, but may not necessarily be done and a fast management. And then it almost fits into general management, doesn't it? Almost, not quite.
With separating those two is more to show that the general management stuff
General management,
no risk whatsoever, really.
Yeah, general management saying that it's not a risk issue, it's a maintenance issue. I get that totally. References, good.
I got a question about that, Mark.
Yes.
If you haven't referenced it in your report, why should it be in your references?
You don't put it in your report if it's not in your references ever.
So I only picked up one of those in the that's been referenced in the report. I may have missed them, but I didn't see you actually reference it to a paragraph anywhere.
I suppose some of them is like tree identification, the bottom two ones.
So that then become a bibliography rather than a reference.
Yeah, I'd agree. And then I don't know whether you even need to include bibliographies in it like this. But having said that, it wouldn't take a lot to add clarity to what you're doing. So, for example, identification of the trees was undertaken using the Key and Costman's L 2006 and Nicole 2006 and so on. So getting those into your reports doesn't take a lot of work. You've just got to put them in to the body, but they should be in the body.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Like I already knew what all the trees were, and not often do I open those books around here because I know what all the trees are. So maybe they don't have to be in there.
Look, it's interesting. I remember this when I did my first diploma, and somebody said, "Oh, you got to give references. You know, how do you know that?" And I said, "Well, I know it." And they said, "So where did you publish this?" I said, "Well, I haven't." They said, "Well, how do you know it?" And I said, "Well, you know, it's what Maddox said, and it's what Shogo said." And she said, "So what did Maddox what are you quoting of theirs? How did they get their thing? And so that becomes what you then put in. So there's nothing wrong with putting them in. What I thought is you're a better arborist if you didn't have references. The reality is exactly the opposite. The more references you've got, the more you can go to the other people to give you the support, the stronger your report becomes.
Yeah, so it's just not you saying it. There's other people saying it as well.
Well, that's right. In fact, these people have done some research. They've published a peer-reviewed paper, or they've published a book, and that's a publication that's stood the test of time, and therefore it has value. So yeah, referencing is great, but you can put them in there. These have all got things that you could have included above.
Yeah.
All printing cuts should be made in accordance with the Australian standard. AS 4373-2007, printing of amenity trees, and then you put that down your bottom bit. There's no problems in adding these in. You've got stuff of Mike Ellison's there. You could add it in quite easily. For example, you use the data collection sheet, so you could put that in there quite easily as your reference.
So it's if it's in this reference list, it should be referenced in the document as well.
Yeah,
in the text.
That's right. If it's not in this reference list, if it's in this reference, it shouldn't be in this reference list if it's not referred to in the document.
I must admit, I'm guilty of being a bit lazy about that.
Yeah. I'm guilty both ways. I'm guilty, and I had a pain in the ass, Rob Stavro, when I was at University of Melbourne. Rob would say to me, "You made this statement. Can you provide a reference to support that?" And I hate it every time I said that. I say, "Well, I could probably find one, but it's going to take real work." And so it was a hard process. And
I think that goes exactly to the audience. Who are you going to? Who do you expect to read this, and what level are they going to read it at? So if you're writing it as a part of a course, then you better get it all really straight. But if you're just writing it to somebody who wants to look at the recommendations and figure out what to do, then probably not so important.
Yeah,
that's probably my target audience in general.
But you can still write it in a fashion that's pitched at the layperson, but reference it so they can see and have confidence that you got that from somewhere else, and that's a peer-reviewed paper. They're not going to go and look at the references. They just they get confidence in it, so it gives you a perception of confidence. Yeah,
that's right. So
good point. Thank you.
And referencing is good, by the way. You've used the standard method, so that's good. Showing where you've been, that's great. And the trees of concern, tree data. I hate tree data. You know that with a vengeance.
I don't know if you can see it, but on the right side, you might have to make it a bit smaller. That's the risk assessment part of the table.
Yes, and this is great. This is ideal. Anyone that's doing risk assessments, providing input data is essential. I do not have to agree with you, but if I cannot find the data that you're putting in, my conclusion is you haven't done it right. If I disagree with you, if you've got the data in there and I disagree with you, then we've got a difference of opinion. So the important thing is to put, it is not saying that you have to go crazy, but if you've got a tree there that you've tagged as being a concern, it needs to have some. So what you've done in terms of saying target 2, size 2, probability of failure 5 is a great way of doing it.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about your descriptions there? Was that something that's a client requirement?
You're saying the notes and comments, or?
Yeah, the notes and comments. So the location of the tree.
that was just to make it easier for the people doing the work. Obviously, the guys
So-
that work at these sites all the time, they know where most of the trees are. They can look at a map and understand. But if you get a company in that don't know the site or whatever,
So you collected with GPS, so they've got coordinates.
Yeah.
Can you not produce a PDF map that allows them to navigate? One of your questions in your email was about that repetition of and collection of data and putting that amount of detail in. It makes it a very slow data collection when you got to type stuff.
Yeah, definitely. That's something I want to be able to do that quicker. It definitely takes me a long time.
Yeah.
And I have cut down on it already.
The only thing,
Like,
if I was
it's
doing a
like-
risk
I
assessment,
used to-
the thing that I would
I used to-
collect,
Yeah.
is what
I even
the
put
issue of
sizes.
concern is.
Hang on a minute. We're both talking. Mark, you have a go.
Sorry?
Mark, you have a go. We're talking over each other.
Sorry. I was just saying that the information that 118 centimetre DBH may be important in finding your tree. The age mature, the height 21 probably isn't so important. Vitality may or may not be. Species is great. If there's no tag number, just delete the column out altogether. If you've got your GPS reference, that's fine. But you want to try and minimize the number of columns. You know, the fewer columns, the fewer information you collect, the better off. The one thing you need to communicate to me is what's the issue of concern, and I'm not seeing that. It's the court tree, 3 larger dead branches. So what's your risk assessment for? Is it for the
says on
discharge tree, or is
when
it 3 dead branches?
There's a risk assessment off column. That's where it explains what the risk assessment is of. So under
Leaning tree.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the leaning tree. Gotcha. Excellent. Great.
and I put the sizes of the parts there too, which I don't do anymore.
Yep. Excellent. You might just change that column to an alternate name, a factor of concern or feature of concern.
Yeah.
Rather than risk assessment of.
So
So
all those headings are just off the Excel spreadsheet from.
Yep. So you can change that anytime you like.
Well, you can't actually change the spreadsheet itself because it's protected or whatever, but I can change it once it's in Word for sure.
Yes, that's right. You can set it up the way you want. The other thing you can do if you're using Word is you can have this title page, a title column here, reoccur automatically on each new page.
Yeah. How do you do that again? I used to do that and then I forgot how to do it and I didn't look it up again.
My answer is ask Google.
Okay.
How do I set it up so that my title row occurs in a table on each new page? And I'll set it up. I'll tell you how to do that. And
good answer.
In fact, I'm going to be horrible now. If you gave that, set the basic table up, you could actually have ChatGPT or something like that now actually produce that for you. I'm fascinated. One of the requirements that I have from the department is I can't have the face of a student in a photograph. And, I spend so much time blurring out faces in bloody school playgrounds. And one of my team the other day said, let me show you something, Mark. And she walked in and she said, ChatGPT, take all the people out of this photograph. And 5 seconds later, 10 seconds later, there it was. There's a photograph without any people in it. It's just edited them out. You can get so much now with these AI platforms to do so much for you. So don't feel ashamed about using it. That's what it's meant to do. You've just found a new employee, and it's an employee you can employ for, I think, $15 a month or something. It's just great. Okay. By the way, I like the fact that you grade every second row. I think that's great. I think it makes it easier to read. But you do lose a lot of space with things like vitality here. Species could be, half that width. So you could try and reduce the space where it's not necessary to have a lot of detail. So data collection is great. I hate data sheets, as I said. They're always at the back. I want to read the front bit. This is the bit that's hard.
Yeah.
Then we've
I don't really expect anyone to read that table, but it's just there if...
No, that's right. That's exactly why it's in the appendix.
So this is probably the main part where you would,
it's the top bit. Photographs are good. I've got them blowing up. You're using them on, is it an A3 page?
I don't think so. It's just
A4, no, it's A4 landscape with 3 images to the thing in portrait mode. That works well. I like that. Look at possibly having a little bit of space above. You can set when you're in Word, you go to margins, and in margin you set a 0.5 mil margin at the top, and that'll just stop that sitting on the line. I think that'll just make it easier to read. The same we discussed last week, just trying to give a little bit of space between the lines of your table and the text itself.
When I was looking at this, Nils, sometimes I couldn't really understand from looking at the photo which tree was the one that you're referring to.
That's kind of, well, I've got the description as well.
Throw an arrow.
But I find that those burnt sites are terrible. All the trees look exactly.
Sorry, what was that, Niels?
All the burnt sites are really hard to take photos of the trees.
Yes, it is. But if you're worried about this dead branch here, just put a circle around it using whatever piece of software you're using. You can very quickly just put a line there, an arrow in here to say it's that tree there. We're left to try and figure that out. Does that make sense?
I think that would go a long way to dealing with the issue of in the data sheets, you've tried to describe the tree and its position and so forth in order so that people can find it when they're traipsing around. But having these photos marked up would be a really big help.
Yeah, just to have an arrow or something too, could you?
I'll show you one in a second, Neil, before we get off the thing, just to give you an idea.
So I really made these ones just to make it easy for whoever comes to do the work. They can just follow all the. It's done like clockwise, and then just all the trees are clockwise, and then just the pictures follow. But
okay. Again, you seeing that because you've got it in context. Not having been there, I don't get that. But I know that you're talking about this comardulensis here. Really easy just to throw an arrow in and say it's that tree. And it takes a lot of time to do this. Getting your template set up was an important part of it.
I almost change it every third report I do. I change something for it.
I have done now well over a couple of thousand tree risk assessments in schools, and the last change I had that was significant was last week. I just realized that I couldn't handle the spacing and I had to get it sorted out. So easy to constantly be improving your template, but the template will save you time every time. It's the most valuable tool that you have. Jeremy.
Unlike Mark, I actually like the tables. What is the point of the photos? Is it just for the people on site trying to find the trees?
Mostly, I think.
So you can put a hyperlink in the table so they can open up on a tablet, and they can press the hyperlink and it shows up there. So you're not repeating those photos, having all that time of putting the photos in and transferring the same data you got in your table to onto your photos.
It does take a bit of time.
So what you can also do is the table that you put into the report is a cut down version of the digital copy that you give them. So on the digital copy you give them, that's got all the columns, your lat longs or your eastings and northings, however you're setting it up, and your digital reference to the image. You can also hyperlink it in the PDF to the image, so you don't have to keep copying those images in if it is just for identification. I usually put in examples of dead trees. You know, these are examples of what we're talking about to tell the story, but not necessarily every tree.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely, when we take the photos, we do it on site and mark the tree or branch or concern on the phones when we take the photos.
Yeah. Yes, I've got I'll close the report down, but on the site map, I got all the GPS points, and then all the trees that I've put as essential risk mitigation work. I'll make them red on the map, and then the minor yellow, and then the other ones are just grey or white.
So
I pretty much just tell the guys.
This is just the use of the arrow to talk about which tree we're talking about.
Yep.
And you can see, talking about this tree here, there's another spot of gum right beside, another one at the back. It would be really easy to get them wrong. I'm talking about two Aloe casuarinas here, or casuarina oliveralis, whichever they are. And I've marked them with that arrow, so again, it makes them easy to find. And even though I've spray painted the trunk because this is a dead tree, I still added the arrow in the communication because I'm wanting the reader to find it with ease. Even where I put my arrow, I'll often move an arrow to a darker spot if I need to, just to make it more obvious. Because it's amazing how easy it is to miss even an arrow in a photograph. Another thing that I've done in this, and it's a simple process, I put an insert.
Oh, yeah.
That's the same. It's from a different image. I've taken it at greater magnification, and then I've just cut it, cropped it, and put it in so you can see exactly what I'm looking at. You know, same sort of thing here. Really easy just to say that's the issue I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Make sense?
That's nice. Yeah.
So if you do that, it becomes easier for the person. A picture paints 1,000 words, and sometimes we get lost in those words. I see 5 trees, 6 trees in a photograph, and if I don't spell it out, smart people will figure it out. But remember, your reader's not always in the same wavelength as you, and so they could be still quite intelligent and still get the wrong tree. And you know, I've seen it with as far as trees getting cut down, the wrong tree getting cut down. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that's seen that.
I've definitely been on site when people do that.
Yeah.
At least twice in the last year, I think.
There's an old saying, and it goes: the aim is not to communicate so we can be so that we can be understood. The aim is to communicate so we can't be misunderstood.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, I get sometimes we overdo it. As I said, in every risk report, I'm saying the same thing in 3 different ways. I'm saying it in a tabulated form, I'm saying it in a verbal form, I'm saying it in an image form. Not because people are silly, but different people take in things differently. And
People are silly.
things differently. And so I think the images are great there. I don't have any problems. And if you're using you could set it up as a table. The only problem I have it in a digital format is then I've got to open up everything and individually or collectively download the whole lot. So if it's in your report, I'd say, oh, if I was going to look at that, I'd probably print it rather than take a tablet. I hate tablets in the field, but Jeremy's 10 years younger than me. Jeremy is really comfortable with tablets in the field. Rob, we agree tablets in the field is a bad idea.
Hard to work with, yep.
Yeah.
I think both works pretty good, but like I said, in the last month, I've had both reading off paper report and off a tablet, and both companies I was working for at the time, they both cut the wrong tree anyway. So.
Yeah, look, when I'm out on a site that I've been on before, I've got my photo library with me in Google Photos. And, there'll be times when I say, well, what was that like last year? And I'm, able to go back and reference it. So, and there are times when I think, an iPad mini or even an iPad would be a lot easier to look at the image on. But, it's another thing to carry around. And I'm already looking like I'm a builder when I go around with all the gear I've got. And I take it all around with me. So you do understand, I've got bib and brace, overalls, tool belt, and everything that I think I want on an average tree inspection. Because if I'm 200 or 300 or 500 meters or a kilometer from the car, I don't want to go back to the car to get a probe. I want to make sure I've got it with me. I'm not going to go back to get a diameter tape. I want to make sure I've got it with me.
How do you guys collect data? Anyway, I just walk around with all my stuff, and I might do a round first and have a look at what the site is like, and then just start at one end and collect my data onto that spreadsheet on the computer and take photos.
What system works for you? Follow it if it works for you.
It works great. It just takes a long time. That's all. I can't do any. I can do it. I think that report we just looked at, I would have been there at least 6 or 7 hours without driving.
How long?
Probably 6 or 7 hours. But then I've put all that information into the table, so the table is finished.
Yeah,
I can just.
I think it's a good report. I think it's solid. You've certainly not got a lot of the common mistakes that I see in a tree risk assessment report. And as I said today, when I saw that one said that the camphor laurel dead branch needed to be removed within 2 weeks, I just sort of thought, oh no, there's just no relationship to reality. Just be careful about time frames. Communicate that it's essential. Communicate that it's an unacceptable risk, and that's half the job. The risk manager's job is then to figure out how quickly they need to do it. I really do think that is a risk management function rather than a risk assessment function.
Yeah. Many people, I find, they just want to be told what to do as well.
But they don't.
They don't care what it costs or whatever. They just want to just tell me what to do and we'll do it, because I don't really care. I just want no problems.
Yeah.
That's what they think.
And I don't know whether the app, and I'll just mention it briefly, the app Snap Send Solve works in any other state, certainly works in New South Wales beautifully. And, if I see a tree problem at the side of the road or side of the property I'm on, I can actually report it to the local council digitally online. That's something you might want to have a look at, see if it does work elsewhere. A wonderful piece of software. I get a reporting incident. Now we record that incident number, and I can say, I've looked at the tree, I've reported to the local council. Because again, the problem is when I say to a client, talk to the owner, I don't know whether they've done that or not. And it's really hard to keep a track of. Whereas if I can report it, it just is one thing that's resolved. I know that it's done. So Snap Send Solve.
Mark?
Snap Send Solve is the name of the app, Vicky. All New South Wales councils are on it. Telecom, main roads. So, if you want to report a big dead tree that's leaning over a road, you can do that.
Can you, if you go to use it, can you make sure you put an address down? We get 10 or 100 of them a week, and 90 of them don't have an address.
They should GIS when you do them, and I'd always tell you to GIS them, guys. So just
it's unbelievable how many we get far out. No address, no location, no nothing.
Darren, you make me laugh. I can't believe anyone, because the app says here, and it says where you are, and if you want to put it somewhere else, you actually have to tell it to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I'll come back.
I don't know whether a lot of people have like their location turned on with it. I think that's the issue, but the girls in the app come to us, and it's just like, wow, you got to be kidding me. Whereabouts in New South Wales is this?
Yeah. It's a New South Wales app. I don't know whether it works outside of New South Wales, but it's a neat little piece of software. And you know, if it's resolved, I get told it's resolved. I get told if they've read it. And you know, things like the water blocking up the local drain after the recent rain, I can report that on it. The Telstra cable that's on the ground, I can report that, and so on. So it's a neat little process, guys. I'd like to do more, but it is 8:20, and I had an unfortunately late start last night. I finished at 2 in the morning and started at 5 this morning, so I'm about ready to go hit the hay.